Insolvencies tell the tale. Households, businesses succumb to debt amid inflation. What cannot happen will not happen. If incomes and profits are stagnant or declining, while taxes, prices, and interest rates rise, people will fail to pay their debts, as do 123,000 Canadians every year. The long-term buildup of urban house prices made people financially vulnerable. Then COVID-19 lockdowns ushered in record business and consumer insolvencies. I sounded the alarm about Canadian indebtedness and insolvencies in early 2019, prior to COVID-19. Since then, the situation has worsened dramatically. A quarter of Canadians fell behind on their bills during the COVID-19 spread, and 1/5 borrowed from family or friends. The key message I would like to convey in this chapter is the severity of Canada's self-inflicted economic rot, of which escalating debts and insolvencies are symptoms. Canada is overtaxed, underhoused, miseducated, and becoming unfriendly to investment. From inflation and deficits to investment and wages, everything that should be up is down, and everything that should be down is up. The wreckage in numbers. Business insolvencies in Canada increased by 33.8% annually through March 2022, the highest year-over-year increase in 31 years. Jean-Daniel Breton of the Canadian Association of Insolvency and Restructuring Professionals, CAIRP, added, quote, "With inflation now at a 30-year high and the Bank of Canada looking to correct with several interest rate increases this year, it stands to reason that we could see even further surges in the rate of business insolvencies," unquote. Total consumer debt is at $2.665 trillion and growing. That is more than $60,000 per capita. Household debt, in particular, is rising faster than incomes. Relative to after-tax income, it is approaching 200%, up from 145% in 2008. Consumer insolvencies stabilized temporarily on the back end of the lockdowns, but CAIRP warned, quote, "While only a small quarterly uptick in consumer insolvencies was registered in Q1 of 2022, there was a 24.4% jump in filings from February to March, the largest monthly rate of increase in 13 years. The surge could be an early sign of some consumers buckling under the pressure," unquote. The warning proved prophetic as consumer insolvencies jumped a hard-to-believe 23% in 2023. According to a Hoyes, Mikolos and Associates review, credit card debt was the primary driver. They estimate that 91% of insolvency filers hold credit card debt, and that rises to 96% of insolvent homeowners. They now carry an additional $32,728 in credit card debt each. An Ipsos survey suggests millennials are struggling the worst. 62% fear their capacity to repay their debts versus 1/3 of the general adult population, and 46% are moving closer towards bankruptcy. Almost half of Canadians acknowledge their difficulties and grade themselves C or below for financial literacy. In the absence of substantive market liberalization, young Canadians are rational to be pessimistic. They have their work cut out for them. As reported by the Taxpayers Federation, 2023 ushered in 5 new taxes at the federal level and added about a $10,000 increased burden per middle-class worker. Debtors feel the rate hike pinch. The Bank of Canada is gradually raising interest rates, although they remain negative in real, inflation-adjusted terms. This is likely just the beginning of efforts to stem the inflationary tide, and Canadians, accustomed to virtually free debt, are feeling the pinch. CAIRP analysts believe higher rates will hurt consumers in a worsening fashion over time. CAIRP emphasizes educating Canadians to avoid unhealthy debt levels and deceptively easy credit. Bankruptcy Canada echoes this sentiment, contending that, quote, "excessive use of credit is the number one cause of bankruptcy," unquote. On a proximal basis, unexpected disasters are the most frequent straw that breaks the camel's back, followed by job losses or reduced working hours. However, the infatuation with interest rates and personal habits distracts from deeper trends. Notably, these include the stagnant or declining productivity, purchasing power, and discretionary income of a suffocated and increasingly centralized economy. Taxes, housing, raise cost of living. A too often overlooked aspect of Canadians' financial woes is taxation. Including all levels, its growth has far outpaced inflation and productivity, and it accounts for almost half of a family's annual budget. At $50,000 on average and the most expensive item, taxation is more than housing, food, and clothing combined. Although taxation already consumes between 2/5 and 1/2 of the Canadian economy, deficits are set to raise that level higher. Between 2019 and 2021, Canada had the second highest deficit to GDP ratio of OECD nations. The lion's share of household income goes to taxation and housing, and the latter has also been rising glaringly over the past 2 decades. Canada's housing market is showing signs of cooling down, but prices are still higher than in 2021. During the previous decade's boom, prices almost doubled, hitting young buyers the most. Toronto and Vancouver consistently rank among the least affordable places on the planet due to outlandish housing costs. The bottom line is that affordable housing, with some notable exceptions, has become a quaint idea in Canada, as has a vibrant middle class. Official inflation in mid-2022 jumped to levels not seen this century. Although down from an 8.1% high in June 2022, reported inflation as of November 2023 still remains outside the Bank of Canada's target of 1 to 3%. Living in Canada has become painfully expensive. Wage stagnation. In real inflation-adjusted terms, according to StatCan data, Canadians get by on the same hourly pay they received in the 1970s. Full-time payroll employees received $31.87 per hour in 2021. Likewise, real GDP per capita is back to 2006 to 2008 levels, those seen prior to the global financial crisis. The economy never bounced back, and in the COVID-19 era, it has regressed to even worse than the pitiful growth new normal of the 2010s, the worst decade for growth since the 1930s. Quote, "This trend of wageless growth in the face of a rise in employment highlights the structural changes in our economies, and it underlines the urgent need for countries to help workers, especially the low-skilled," according to OECD Secretary General Angel Gurria. She put her finger on the problem of inflexible and insufficiently competitive labor markets for workers to command higher wages when their productivity rises. This impeded growth stems from 2 chief sources: a misallocated, poorly prepared labor force and the lack of a competitive, well-capitalized private sector for employment. Regarding the latter, C.D. Howe Institute CEO William Robson of Toronto commented in December 2023 that the numbers are awful for business investment in the last decade. In particular, he laments declining capital per worker. That means investment has not kept up with depreciation and population growth, and this all but guarantees stagnant, if not negative, marginal productive labor, worker compensation. Canada has in recent years fallen down the world ranking for economic freedom, after being a stalwart of the top 10. Ranked 14th for 2020, Canada's saving grace in the ranking, protecting her position, appears to be setbacks for her peers as well. Fred McMahon of the Fraser Institute summarizes Canada's decline, quote, "This is profoundly important. Numerous fact-based studies show economic freedom powers growth, prosperity, and poverty reduction," unquote. Further, Canada's sprawling higher education sector is weighed down by social justice activism and churning out graduates ill-suited to a dynamic economy. More than 1/3 of those earning the minimum wage now have a post-secondary diploma. No turnaround on the horizon. Writing for the Financial Post, Philip Cross has lamented Canada's lack of business ambition and values that foster innovation. He is right. Mediocrity, egalitarianism, interventionism, and the status quo will not cut it in an increasingly competitive world with nations battling for precious capital. As Canadian families struggle to prosper, they cannot even trade freely between the provinces, supposedly a right established by the 1867 Constitution Act. Canada is blessed with natural resources and opportunities that are the envy of the world. Canada is a predominantly English-speaking nation, has a common law tradition, and shares a peaceful border with the most lucrative trading nation on the planet. Canada has no one to blame for her economic challenges but herself. Canada still ranks a respectable 15th in the 2022 Global Innovation Index, which is a sophisticated scoring system that includes 81 indicators. However, if your next-door neighbor ranks 2nd in the world and has vastly greater opportunities, you have your work cut out for you when competing for talent and capital. In fact, the United States has markedly outperformed Canada for economic growth during and after the COVID-19 spread. Although many ingredients contribute to personal finance and fiscal policy challenges, the first step to solving a problem is recognizing it. Canadians are swimming in debt with no respite in sight. Rather than throw taxpayer money at educational programs or cut interest rates, which would encourage even more borrowing, attention must be paid to why people have less discretionary income to handle their debts. On an individual level, one must take the initiative and prepare accordingly for stormy seas. The cold fact is that household debt in Canada has been on the rise for 30 years, with an escalation over the last 20 years. The partner to unsustainable debt is bankruptcies, and they were already spiking in early 2019. The causes of household indebtedness run deep and will not go away with a new coat of paint. Struggling households underline the need for fiscal austerity, a reduction or elimination of zoning and occupational barriers to construction, an overhaul and downsizing of higher education, and a return of Canada's economic freedom to among the best in the world. However, since the majority of Canadians appear to be addicted to a cradle-to-grave nanny state and hell-bent on education for social engineering, they will vote against and resist pertinent reforms. The do-nothing path points to backwater status. It also means the long-term bleeding of Canada's best talent to the United States, akin to the loss of talent from Atlantic Canada to Alberta in past decades. Given my policy background, I'm inclined to promote policy prescriptions. So as to not waste time with finger-pointing, however, part 2 of this book addresses personal solutions. One need not wait around for reforms that, at best, will be slow and incremental.